Hello and welcome to Talk to Stu with me, Stuart Magoo. Hopefully you can all hear me reasonably well. Hopefully there's not too much background hiss. If anybody's got any problems with sound or anything like that, do let us know in the chat and I can see what we can do about that. Hopefully it'll all be fine. I'm seeing some little love hearts popping up, so it's looking good. So hello and welcome to the Talk to Stu show. We have been absent doing this for a month or two now, due to the fact that I've been quite unwell and I've had to have some surgery and to have my gallbladder removed. That was fun. So getting a little bing bong from the Duke of Nuke, who is moderating, and he's telling me the sound is good. So welcome everyone, thank you all for joining us this evening. We've got lots of people in the chat. Hello to Joanne, to Batula, Jackie Day as well, Jill Thompson, nice to see you again. John Brooks, welcome. Michelle, Stevie C, Sonia W, Little Blue Dress, lots of people. Thank you all for joining us. Caesar, I've seen pop up. And special welcome and thanks for their support also to Edward and Sarah Brown, who are joining us this evening, helping us with answering some of the questions. So they are, Edward particularly, acting like my elves. Now we're hoping to have Edward join us in the future in a slightly different capacity. For this evening you're going to be getting some very robust answers because obviously you'll have my big brain and you'll have Edward there as well. So you're getting two for the price of one in a sense. But sadly we're not joined by Becky this evening as Becky is not doing too great at the moment and is also on Odin sitting duty. Odin is our new puppy and of course it's fireworks night, so that is another important thing that we need to consider. So yes, keep your puppies and your dogs and your cats warm and safe, and hopefully there's not too many fireworks going off around by you to disturb them too much. So we're going to get into answering your questions. We've had quite a few come in already, so we've got plenty to be going on with. Now, obviously, we try and answer as many questions as we possibly can, but we can't always do that in the chat. So do be aware, we run between 7 and 8 p.m. and we try and get as many answers as we can in. However, if we're not able to answer your question directly, we will tell you as we go along how you will be able to either access support locally to you so that you can get support with that. It might be that you've already tried that and haven't had much joy. If you haven't come across it before, we'll also drop a link in the chat at the end of the show to Edward's support group, which he runs on Facebook, which is a really useful group, and that will allow you to pop your questions in there and he'll be able to answer them for you. And of course you can email me as well, and we'll pop the email address in there. Now obviously with the chat, generally speaking, everybody is really lovely and really supportive in the chat, but we are being very careful with moderating this, and we have people from all races and cultures in the chat, so obviously if anything comes up that we feel might be a little bit offensive, then those things may be removed. Sometimes that happens automatically by YouTube. It's got like an auto moderator thing on there, but it might be that those things happen as well. So be kind to each other, and we're not here to kind of really I was going to say we're not here to discuss politics, but it's all politics in a way. But yeah, we're just going to try and keep it nice and civil. Now, the first thing I want to discuss this evening, or talk about a little bit, which is a question that's come up a lot for me recently on the channel, and somebody posted quite a big thing on it today, is about the winter fuel payment. So I'm going to start off with this one. Now, obviously, the Labour government announced that they are stopping the winter fuel payment and restricting it to people that are on pension credit. So there's been a lot of questions and a lot of stuff in the news about people applying for pension credit, and many of the let's say more mainstream news outlets have been sort of scaring people, telling them that there's this huge form that needs to be filled in and it takes ages, and and that can be quite worrying. But actually, applying for pension credit is one of the easier benefits to apply for. Now, when I say easy, that is in inverted commas, because easy is relative. It is a means tested benefit, so people are required to provide their financial details on request to the Department of Work and Pensions, and they will be required to provide bank statements and evidence of whatever savings they might have, which could come in different forms. So there might be investments, things like premium bonds, stuff like that. So all of those things will need to be provided, which sounds quite complicated. And if you go down the fill in the form route it is. However, the easiest thing to do is to give them a ring. So if you do a quick Google of how to apply for pension credit, and you look at the gov.uk website, then you will find on there the telephone number. Now, we'll post it up on here a little bit later for you. So that's quite, I have to say, quite an easy thing to do. Obviously, there's a bit of a wait at the moment when phoning, because pension credit previously was not an oversubscribed benefit, but following the announcement, the number of people contacting them for to go through first of all the eligibility assessment and then put in the application has gone up quite a bit. So when you phone them, you will need your basic details, your name, age, date of birth, where you live, all that sort of thing. On top of that, you will need your national insurance number, and of course you will need to provide information about your savings, and they will assess on the phone while you're there whether or not you'll be eligible for pension credit. If they decide that you are, then you filled out the majority of the form with them on the phone. Now, the phone call does take anything from half an hour to an hour, depending on your particular circumstances. A lot of people can have quite complex circumstances with their finances, multiple accounts. It might be that one person is of pensionable age and another not, in a couple relationship and things like that. So it can take a while to go through that, but generally speaking, the people that you speak to on the phone are relatively helpful and talk you through the entire process. It's something that, generally speaking, I would advise people to do. However, if you are unsure of whether this applies to you, or you're feeling a bit confused about whether to even make that phone call in the first place, then I definitely recommend speaking to Age UK, either calling their national helpline or finding an office locally to you and either giving them a ring or popping in, because they'll be able to advise you on it in a lot more detail. So that can be quite useful. Now, in terms of the actual winter fuel payment, there's a bit of confusion over the way that is assessed. So generally speaking, that is assessed, and this is the question that I had earlier, was what is the actual, when is it assessed from? Well, it's in line with your age for state pension. So every year that qualifying date moves up. So the qualifying date last year was 1957, this year is 1958, next year will be 1959. And when they're looking at this, even if you're on pension credit and say your partner, your husband, or your wife, or whoever you are cohabiting with, even if they're not receiving pension credit, their circumstances will need to be taken into account as well, and that may affect the way that you receive the winter fuel payment. It may be paid to you in one payment, or it may be paid in two payments, one to each of you, and things like that. So it very much depends on the circumstances that you particularly have. So that's why it's best to kind of talk through these things. However, the winter fuel payment is something that happens essentially automatically every year after you've first applied for it. So if you qualify for it this year, you won't need to worry about doing that again next year. So, right, that is the general thing for that. There's a lot more information, as I say, about pension credit on the Age UK website, as well as a few things that you need to download from there, like PDF documents which will explain that, or you can also download some of their booklets as well, which explain it in a sort of more basic way and have all the phone numbers, or as I say, Google pension credit and look at the gov.uk website. So let's get into it. There's quite a lot of questions come in already. So we've got a question from John Brooks which has come in. So John has said that he has had a back injury for over 15 years. He was generally working as an engineer before that, and he's had to give it up, and he's wondering whether or not he should apply for personal independence payment. This is a common question we get. Now, I've done a video on this. Does my health condition qualify for me claiming personal independence payment? It's one of my FAQ videos, number one, I think, in fact. It's in my FAQs video, so you can see that in a lot more detail there. Edward's also commented on this as well, this question, which basically we agree on this point, I think, which is with PIP, basically it's not really dependent on what your condition is, it's dependent on how it affects you. Now, how a condition affects you can be quite complicated, and there's a lot of detail that you need to think about on how it impacts you through the day. How is it impacting you on eating? How is it impacting you on preparing meals? How is it impacting you on washing and bathing, on toileting, on mobility, all of these things. So it's about the impact that it has on you rather than the specific condition itself. Now, just on the little bit that John's put there, and I would encourage you not to share any more information about your health conditions here, John, but just on the little bit that you've put there, it does sound like there's a strong possibility that you might, and I do underline the word might, qualify for personal independence payment. However, the most important thing to think about when applying for personal independence payment is, can I get support with that application process? Filling out the form is very complicated, and it's particularly challenging if you have dyslexia or anything like that. I'm dyslexic myself, so writing these things out can take quite a long time. On top of that, you need to know exactly how to put things across to them to be in with a good chance. But that's not even all of it. You also have to go through the telephone assessment or face-to-face assessment in some cases, and it may also be that you have to apply for mandatory reconsideration and even go to appeal with it, because quite a lot are rejected even when you've done a very detailed assessment. So what I always recommend is that you find out support local to you if you can. The first port of call in most areas is the Citizens Advice Bureau. There tends to be long waiting lists for support there, but when you start the application process for personal independence payment, you can usually get extensions to when you need to return the form by, if you are getting that kind of support, and the CAB will help you with arranging those extensions and things like that. So even if you phone them up and they say, oh, we've got a 2 or 3 month waiting list, that may not be a problem. Okay, it might be for them, but it won't be a problem for you. If you get on that waiting list, or if you order the form and everything, then that process will be started and you'll have somebody to support you through it. But most importantly, when you first contact them and you get to speak to somebody about it, they will be able to talk through your health conditions with you and identify whether or not you're eligible to even actually start going through this process in the first place, because it can be quite an onerous process. It's not easy. Some people have a great experience with it and it just goes through for them like that, and you know, they don't have any worries. Other people unfortunately go through the ringer a little bit with it, and there's no rhyme or reason to that. I can't say that everybody has a terrible experience with it, and I can't say that the majority of people have a good experience, but what I can say is, it is, if you are disabled and you are really struggling, it is very important that you do apply for personal independence payment and that you do so with support. Anyway, there's a lot more details about that on some of my other videos. There's also someone else on YouTube who does videos on PIP called Charlie Anderson. She's worth looking at, but especially also check out Edward's group as well. Now, hopefully Edward will pop a link to his Facebook group in the chat that I've got with him, and then I can bang it straight into the chat there and you'll be able to jump on there. Edward's got loads of fantastic resources that are really simply spaced out and easily presented, easy to read, and very clear as well. So you can go there and you can look at those resources, but on top of that, if you've got any questions, pop them into his Facebook about your specific case and he'll be able to answer in a bit more detail. So let's go. Here we go. Edward's putting that in there at the moment, so when that comes through I'll drop it in. Where are the questions gone? Oh, I've gone up too far, that's a problem. Michelle, so Michelle's second on the list. Do be aware, if you have dropped a question, it might be a while ago that you dropped the question, but we will come to it, so do stick with us, or we will try and come to it, so do stick with us. Michelle, I have 5 recent letters from psychologists and therapists to say my panic attacks are worse. Shall I send them? Yeah, if they are letters, this is a good thing. PIP evidence or employment support allowance evidence or universal credit, out of work sickness benefit element, which is employment support allowance to the work capability assessment. For all of those things, if you've got letters which are reports that detail your condition, these are fantastic bits of evidence to be submitting and sending in. Always make sure you take copies and send in the copies. Make sure that you put your national insurance number on each copy. Make sure you keep the originals for yourself. Okay, if you're not sure where to get copies done, if you're not easily able to find a copy place near to you, check to see if you've got a local library. Quite often they can do those things. Post offices are quite good for that as well, and again, a Citizens Advice Bureau. Also local churches and things may well be if you're out in the sticks in a little parish, it might be worth popping to a local community centre or church to see if they can help you get do photocopies and things like that. And libraries are a great resource as well. Often there's people at libraries that can help you with some elements of doing these forms and things, particularly if you've got to do anything online. So worth looking into, but definitely those kind of letters are really very beneficial and to send in. Don't send in appointment letters and things like that. Generally people don't want to see those. They will pick up those kind of things when they request information from your GP, if you've of course signed the box to say that it's okay for them to contact your GP, so which I definitely advise you do. Now I'm going to just pop the link to Edward's group in the chat for those who haven't seen it before. Hopefully this link will, it's a shortened link, and hopefully YouTube will let me post it. Yep, there, it's just come up in the chat. So that's Benefits Support UK is the group, so do drop in there. And let's go back to the questions. Stevie C. Okay. Hi everyone. Does anyone know if UC are asking for 6 months bank statements, including those in ESA support group or LCWRA? This sort of changes in different areas, and there could be different reasons as to why they're requesting that. If you've had a request, and I will always say this, if you've had a request to provide a certain amount of bank statements or any of those things, you do need to provide it. There's not really any getting around that. Generally speaking, they don't tend to ask for more than 6 months bank statements. You will, of course, have all possibly heard that the Labour Party have reignited the old let's have a look at your bank accounts policy that the Conservatives were bringing through earlier in the year. There is a bit of confusion about that. It doesn't mean, even with the new bill, it doesn't mean that they have direct access. The DWP have direct access to your bank account. They don't. But it will mean that rather than the bank providing information to the DWP on request from the DWP when they're investigating a suspected case of fraud, what it will mean is that the banks will be using a sort of machine learning algorithm that will pick up if there are discrepancies within a person's bank account activity. Now, in theory and on paper, it says it shouldn't affect the likes of us mere mortals, that it's there to root out organised crime, and that there will be safeguards in place to make sure that this doesn't flag up people like us, but it is perfectly possible. However, that system isn't in place at the moment, but it's really important to remember that however that turns out to be, it may not be as terrible as we think it's going to be. I mean, it might be, but it might not be, so that's always important to bear in mind. But whatever the situation with that is, when it comes to the government, the DWP providing you with benefits, there's a sort of contractual obligation in that for you to share with them as much information about your circumstances as is deemed to be reasonable. And legally speaking, if you were to take it to court in some way, 6 months is deemed reasonable for looking at bank accounts to assess your income. And indeed, if you're on carer's allowance or universal credit and you're doing something like self-employment or a number of hours and you're a week on flexible contracts or something like that, then you're having to provide sort of weekly updates about your income and that sort of thing. So although it is a bit negative in a sense, it's still kind of essential. Otherwise, it might be that your benefit is stopped, and they have the legal right to do that. So if they ask for it, provide it. That's the best advice, always. Sonia, I'm in the middle of a UC review. They asked for 4 months bank statements. Now waiting for an interview. Does anyone know what this is about? Unfortunately, we don't. I had a client last week who was very nervous and concerned because the DWP had got in touch with them for similar reasons, and it turned out to actually be nothing at all. Other people I've known, it's been because there's an indiscrepancy in some information that they've got and they're trying to straighten it out, and that has either meant that in some rare cases the DWP say we owe you more money. In other cases it's been that people have had to pay money back to them. So we are seeing a lot more of this going on. The DWP have put a lot more funding into the fraud and error department. When they're looking at these things, it doesn't necessarily mean that there has been a fraud or that they're investigating that. Usually, if they were, they wouldn't be inviting you to the job centre just to speak to your job coach and bring down bank statements. They tend to go a different path when it's a fraud thing. But with asking you to come in, it might be to look at your claimant commitment. It might be to just iron out some discrepancies in the payments you're getting. I had last year, for me personally, it was a housing benefit related thing where they thought somebody was living at my house that wasn't, and it turned out to be some data collection exercise that Experian did on behalf of the council, and they had somebody living there who shouldn't have been, and I'd never heard of this person, and that took about 4 months of me, 4 or 5 months of me arguing with them to kind of get it straightened out, which was of course stressful. I'm not arguing that it wasn't, but generally speaking, there was no accusations of fraud or anything like that. It was just an error, and when these things come through, you think, oh my god, but actually it may not be as bad as you think. Okay, Little Blue Dress. Hi Stu, I'm due to migrate to UC by the 20th of this month. I will probably need to take the advance to cover my rent. Will I have to pay the loan back at the old rate of up to 25% or the lower 15%? Thanks. As far as I'm aware, the lower rate hasn't come in yet, so it's quite likely at this stage that you're going to be paying it back at the 25% rate for the time being. My understanding, although we've not had a great deal of detail with it at the moment, but my understanding is that when the 15% rate comes in, that will apply to everybody, whether it's a new or an old debt. The loan repayments, however, have changed in that when you take out a crisis loan, you're given the option of paying it back over 1 year or 2 years. So that's the difference with that. So it may well be that they give you the 2-year option. So think carefully about doing that, because it does, obviously, if you pay it back over 2 years, then you get more money in your pocket each month, but it does mean that you've got a lower universal credit rate for a longer period of time, if you see what I mean. Because after 12 months, if it's paid off, then your universal credit returns to the standard rate that you should be getting based on your circumstances. So now let's have a look. Let's see. I don't want to miss one out, so that's Little Blue Dress. Sonia says she was in the support group on ESA, so yeah, I think they will just be looking at that. Thinking closing my UC, I won't have anything to live on, but if I don't, I'll be forced out of my house, and that will be too much. That's, yeah, Joanne, you did say you were having a hard time. I spotted that in the chat. If I don't, I'll be forced out of my house, and that will be too much. Joanne, I would say that you definitely need to get some support to look at your case. I would go to the CAB with that one. It sounds like there's probably a lot going on there that would need looking into. Also, if it's related to housing as well, I'd recommend getting in touch with Shelter. They may... sometimes they have clinics in certain areas. I know they have one in Birmingham, for example, where people can go along and talk about housing issues and look at benefits and things like that. So we've got a question here from Brian. Now, I know that Edward has popped an answer for Brian in there, so let's have a look at Brian's question first. Hi, there seems to be some worrying stories when migrating from support group ESA to UC and job coaches asking for fit notes. Should it not be that you should be transferred into equivalent UC group? Yes, it should be. It should be. So they and Edward is quite right. I'll read Edward's answer out here. Some people migrating to universal credit are being given misleading advice if you've already applied for universal credit. You need to quote ESA Regulation 19. This is why we love Edward. He's just like that. Bang. I know the regulation. Regulation 19, which allows people in the support group to be moved into the equivalent no work group. The details need to be shared with your work coach. So this is a really good answer from Edward here, and write that down. ESA Regulation 19. You can Google it as well and actually find it, print it out, and shove it up their bum. Sorry, I didn't say that. Pass it to them through your Universal Credit Online journal. But yes, you do get this quite often with work coaches when the migration happens, is that they don't put that transitional protection in place and start asking for fit notes again. It doesn't happen all the time, it's just odds and sods here and there over the country in different job centres, and often it comes down to the fact that job coaches haven't been trained very well, or that they've been rushed through in their training in some way. It's not necessarily that they're trying to pull a fast one. I mean, it might be that, but it's not necessarily that. So yeah, for the more information you have to be able to go in with that and throw that regulation at them, then they've got no argument really. However, if they continue pushing with that, you can raise a complaint directly with your Job Centre Plus, where your Universal Credit account is being managed, and there is indication of how to do that. It's usually done in writing, but you can either request from the Job Centre Plus their official complaints policy, or you can find it on gov.uk as well, which is quite useful, and it takes you through step by step what you need to do. Again, if that's something that you need to do, go and get support with it. If you can, go to your local CAB, drop into Edward's group, ping me an email, and I can share that with you as well. So yeah, brilliant answer from Edward there. Thank you for that. Edward also says his benefits support group is ready to take new members in there. Michelle, are the contribution base moving to UC? Now, as far as I'm aware, they're not at the moment, but I would suspect that will happen in some way. However, a lot of these things, in terms of migration, all of that sort of stuff, is a little bit up in the air, because we are going to be finding out in January of next year a lot more information about what the Labour Party are planning to do in their Get Britain Working white paper, which is going to be a review and an overhaul of the benefits system. So it may be that things like that are up for review. So Edward, feel free to drop in on any of these other questions here. Ed Shaw, Stu, I'm on ESA support group. I'm 66 at the end of March and get my state pension then. Is it too late now to apply for PIP? Recently diagnosed with angina. Yes. This would be a good one for Edward to just confirm for me as well. That would be helpful. Yeah, I think it is too late now. Or, you can apply for it, and you should apply for it as soon as you're able to. But when I say it's too late, what I mean is it may be that you won't qualify for the mobility component within that. A weird thing about benefits is that if you are over state pension age, there is no mobility component for you. Attendance allowance, if anybody applies for a disability benefit over the age of over pension age, which currently is 66, you have to apply for attendance allowance. You don't apply for PIP. Now, if you look at attendance allowance, and in the old days we used to have disability living allowance, it's exactly the same in terms of the form and the way it's assessed and everything, apart from it doesn't have a mobility component. The personal independence payment, generally speaking, if people around the age of 65 going into 66 apply for personal independence payment, I think it might be 6 months ahead, it might be 12 months, I'm not quite sure. It may be longer than that. I will check this, but generally speaking, if people are going over that, if they're applying at that time, then they won't qualify for the mobility component. If you are on personal independence payment and you're on the lower rate of mobility, or you don't have mobility at all, and you have a review after or around the age of 66, then again you won't have your mobility component increased, and certainly if it's at 0, then you won't have that increased either. Oh, here we go. Edward's got the exact wording. Let's post this in the group. So going back to the regulation 19, I'm just going to pop that in the group for everyone. Caesar, I see, tried to post a screenshot, but I don't think that came through. So here we go. Posting the text there from Edward. Thank you, Edward. That's fantastic. Big thanks again to Duke, who's just banging these in and moderating the chat as well. Both doing a fantastic job. Ash, my migration deadline has ended 2 days ago. I don't want to do the move. Am I going to be accused of anything wrong? I'm losing the ESA. Ash, you, I totally understand your fears with all of this. I absolutely do. But you really, really must, as soon as possible, get in touch with them to look at that migration. There is a tiny bit of leeway, but not much. If you're really worried and really scared about it, then as we always advise, please try and find support from a local organisation to help you with that, or speak to one of us online. It is unlikely that you're going to be accused of doing anything wrong in this situation. There are a lot of reasons why people might miss the deadline by a few days, and particularly, if you've got mental health problems, cognitive problems, or even just, physical health. This is why I didn't do the show last month. I just couldn't think. I'd had, so many health problems and stuff over the month with everything. My brain just wasn't working. So there's a bit of leeway with that, but not very much. So please get on it as soon as you can. Don't just do it. Corky, as I'm on ESA support group for the last 9 months, will affect my ESA payments if I take 25% out. I'm going to assume that the word you typed was private, and it auto-corrected to something else. If I take 25% out of a private pension, it may do. It depends what the 25% is. 25% of £1 is 25p, so that wouldn't affect it. But if it's a larger amount, then yes, it may affect your employment support allowance if you are on the income-based employment support allowance or universal credit. You must inform them if you're going to do that, and it will affect you. But what you need to think about as well is how is it going to affect you in the future if you take that 25% out now. Now, we don't give financial advice at all on here. We're not doing that. So what I recommend is you speak to a financial advisor on this one in particular. It's not for me to say what people should or shouldn't do with private pensions. That's not it. But there's a lot more to consider. But in terms of the actual, should you inform them? Yes, you should. Will it affect it if it's over a certain amount, which is around 6,000, so on and so forth? Then yes, it may well affect that, because they will look at you essentially paying yourself an income out of that, which is what a pension is. So there we go. Mo Bark, great name. I'm not good at all 5 months ago. I sent a review PIP form, no answer yet, and I'm waiting to move over to universal credit from employment and support allowance. What's going to happen? Well, these two things are separate though. So they happen separately. Uh, in terms of PIP reviews, they are pretty much universally taking absolutely ages at the moment. The waiting times come down a bit. It's closer to 12 months that people are waiting for a decision at the moment. But generally speaking, people are waiting anything from 6 to 18 months to get a decision on their PIP review. When you make the first initial application, they're still being turned around in about 3 months, 3 to 4 months. But the PIP reviews go on for much longer. Years ago, long time ago now, it used to be that people might have to pay some of their PIP back, but that doesn't happen now. Okay, so you continue getting your personal independence payment up until they make the decision, and hopefully past when they make the decision as well. But were they to reverse that decision and take your PIP away, then you will be able to go through mandatory reconsideration and appeal. And again, I always recommend support with that. The migration to universal credit from employment support allowance, as I say, you should get transitional protection with that. I have done a video about this, about how transitional protection works. The dates are a bit wrong in that video because I made that video and then they changed all the dates. So it says, oh, it's going to go through 28 to 29, and actually it's going through in 24, 25. But nonetheless, the method by which that happens is still the same. That's in my FAQs 2 video. Edward's throwing in. So going back, okay, this is really important as well. Also will probably be useful information to Mo. So going back to Ash, who asked this question as well. So as I said, there's a little bit of leeway, and there's also the term good reason ADMK2. Okay, so if you miss the deadline, get in touch with them, either by phone or by post or by email or through your universal credit account, whatever it is. Go in and quote good reason ADMK2 and ask to speak with the case manager if needs be. This is what Edward's saying. Really good piece of information here. If you've got a good reason why you missed it, like I say, maybe you were ill, maybe you've got a mental health problem that is, preventing you from doing that, whatever it is, make sure that they know what that is. I've just popped that in the chat there for the specific phrase, so also that might come in useful to other people as well. Okay, we've got loads of questions coming in tonight, which is great. Can I ask why they will have a break over the Christmas period as it takes 5 weeks? Good question. I think it's just to do with volume, personally, and employment, and people having time off over that period is quite high. The staffing side of things isn't that great at the DWP at the moment, so that causes a bit of a backlog with processing things as well. And the Christmas period is one of the highest demand periods for the DWP, pretty much the highest demand period. So I'm guessing that those are the reasons behind it. They don't ever explain their reasons. They don't say, oh, this is why we're doing that. They just say, this is what we're doing, and you will deal with it, which is good of them. So Mark R34, yes. So this was a good question. I saw this on the videos earlier, and I was about to answer it, but then we went live. So Mark R34 says, what do you think of my question about my work telling me to take a break from working after being there for 24 years with my condition of epilepsy, seizures in work and in home? So I think if it's the same one that I was looking at earlier, there's occupational health have been involved with this as well. Now, I can't really comment too much on employment issues because I'm not either a HR person or a union man. My feeling is you would need to look into your contract and make sure that they've done everything that is in your contract and also in your employee handbook. So generally speaking, an employment contract will refer to policies that are contained within the employee handbook, and every staff member should have an employee handbook, so they will have listed what their policy is on sickness and absence and also risk within the workplace. Now, any employer has to make reasonable adjustments, so that's another element of this, whether they are keeping up with the Equality Act as well and making sure that they've put reasonable adjustments in for you. If they have done or have made adjustments that seem reasonable from a legal point of view, and there's still a level of risk that is very high, which is to your health, then as an employer they have a responsibility to you in a way to make sure that you're not going to come to harm or injury. Also, depending on the nature of your work, does that affect somebody else? If you had a seizure at work, could that lead to harm to somebody else? For example, if you're operating a forklift truck, that might not be a good time to have a seizure. If you're even if you're working in a shop, that can be quite bad. You might be carrying something, for example, that's quite heavy or quite breakable, glass, things like that, a tray full of, pasta sauces or something like that. So there's all these kind of things to consider. Generally speaking, if an external occupational health company have been brought in, they will have looked at things from all of those points of view. That's why the employer pays them, is to make sure they're kept to a certain extent legally sound. My advice to everyone in employment is always join a union. Unfortunately, in a situation like this, there's always a cooling off period with the union, and also unions do kind of want you to be involved with the union as well. But they can be a really good source of information. Failing that, going to speak to somebody at the CAB and also looking on the ACAS website to see if your employer is doing the things that they should be doing can be really helpful. Now, the ACAS website is essentially set up for employers, not for employees. However, it's really useful for employees, and over the years it's got a lot more sections for employees in there as well. ACAS is spelled AKAS, and sorry, AKA, I said that wrong. It's ACAS, not AKAS, AC. I'm just going to write it in the chat. So here we go. So go and look on the ACAS website. I think it's acas.co.uk, and you'll be able to look into that more. Unfortunately, there does come a point where we all have to give up work. It's just a question of when that happens, and for a lot of us it happens earlier than we would like it to, and that may be the case here, but it is really important that you are treated fairly and with respect. So the best thing to do is have positive conversations as much as possible with your employer and get that advice, and don't do anything too knee-jerk, let's put it that way, that might undermine your position overall. I've seen it quite often where people are in this sort of situation, they throw the tedders out the pram and they go, right, sod you, I'm leaving, and there's managers are sat there going, we were about to give him quite a massive severance pay and he's just quit. So don't do anything rash. Find out the information first. Pearline White, what's going to happen to people on existing LWRCA? So yeah, this has come up a bit where people have been, particularly in response to my recent benefits video, where people are saying, oh, it's all these changes that are proposed, it's only for new people that are applying for universal credit and looking at being placed into the limited capability for work related activity group, or the limited capability for work group. Is that right? Yeah. And yeah, that's sort of true, but they can change the rules at any time, as we've seen. And also, this doesn't also apply if you have a change in circumstances. So if you have a change in circumstances, then that may well affect the situation that you're in. And we've seen this quite a lot, particularly with transitional protection. So people get transitional protection and they think, okay, well, by and large, I've got the same amount that I was before, a little bit less, but it's okay, I can cope with that. And then they move house, or someone moves out of their house, or something happens, and then the whole claim is reassessed again, and they lose their transitional protection, and they lose the transitional payment. So it remains to be seen at this stage what's going to happen with the work capability assessment and how people are assigned in those groups. As I say, we won't know till after January. Everything that's being talked about previously was under the Conservative proposals about it being new claimants only that were affected by it, or people who have a change in circumstance. It may be completely different. Looking at what Labour has said in the budget is they're probably going to go in that very similar direction in some way, but it might be assessed very differently. So just don't panic just yet. Shane, can it look like you've had an extra payment if your bank statement ended early? I've had this happen and it's a bit worrying and confusing. I've seen it the other way round where people have, or not the other way round, but I've seen it where people get paid maybe a little bit earlier in the month because it's a 5-week month, but they get paid on 4 weekdays. On a 4-week rotation, and so their universal credit payment is reduced for the next month because it's taken into account next month's earnings and things like that. But generally speaking, on a bank statement, it is listed by date, and they will be looking at the dates on that bank statement, not the actual where it cuts off at the bottom. So as long as the dates are within that month period, that shouldn't happen. Edward's popped in a good reason document. Oh, this is really good. Oh, is this one you've written yourself, Edward? This is really useful. So it's quite long, it's quite lengthy, but it does explain all the different circumstances when you can show good reason and how that applies in which situation with universal credit. So yeah, it is in most cases, by just a quick look over this, it's sort of discretionary on the basis of the case manager. So that is something to bear in mind. However, there are very clear guidelines as to what the case manager has to do. It also defines in this document what the specific meaning of good reason is, and how to show that, and what sort of timescale to show that within. Generally speaking, we're looking at a very short window for circumstances when it comes to transitioning from from ESA to universal credit. So do bear that in mind. That's really important. So yes, that's really good. Unfortunately, I can't post a link to that article, I don't think, in the chat on YouTube. However, if you join Edward's Benefits UK support group, sorry, got the name wrong. Sorry, Edward. If you join his group, you will be able to find access to these resources, and he will post it there. Or if you need it and you email me, I'll forward it on to you in an email. It's an actual document from the DWP, and he says he's used good reasons on many occasions. This is good, having this direct line with Edward. Really helpful. So yes, now we're coming towards the end of the show, but we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions. Let's see if we can squeeze them all in. Let's bash them through. What should we do when assessors blatantly lie on our reports? What's the best way to approach it at tribunal? I'm going to lose my home if they rule against me. Evidence. One of the things that I do when I'm looking at writing an appeal with people is I look to prove why things can't be true. If this is true, then that can't be true. So a lot of the time, that sort of approach to it comes in really useful. So if one of the things that's really important to remember about health conditions and disabilities, but health conditions in particular, is if you're diagnosed with a certain health condition, then it will have certain symptoms attached to it. That's how you get diagnosed with it. It's not just from an injection or a scan. Those aren't the only ways that a condition is diagnosed. They're also diagnosed because there's obvious symptoms that come as a part of that. Now, if you have those obvious symptoms, then it's impossible for you to have to live without those effects. So that's one way of looking at those things, is where an assessor says, oh well, this person said that they can do this, that and the other, and you've got some evidence from your doctor that says no, they can't, and that's why we've diagnosed that. They may not be saying directly no, we can't, but they might be saying, well, under testing this person had this condition and so on and so forth. Then it's fairly easy to demonstrate that you wouldn't have said that, because that isn't the case, because this is how things are. Also, quite often assessors in their reports will contradict themselves, so they'll say things that DWP assessors, so they'll say one thing and then they'll say something almost opposite to that. So it's going through and looking for those things where they they might say that somebody has they're fine with going out and getting around, but they're not okay with mixing with people in a crowded space or an open space. Well, how can you mix with people if you can't go out or something like that? I've got that the wrong way round, but anyway, you see what I mean. So it's going through and picking those things out. Again, this is why you need the professionals to help you with it, because when I do that and I'm looking at an appeal for somebody, it takes me a while to go through it, and I highlight things and I cross-reference things, and then I need to go back and talk to the client and say, well, they said this, what happened there, and so on and so forth. The other thing that is really important when going through a PIP assessment these days is to request that it is audio recorded. Most of the new organisations, well, not new, but the organisations that have had their contract renewed with the DWP for providing the assessments now offer an inbuilt service where on request they will audio record it. Now, they do make a right song and dance about it. They don't make it bad for you to do, but they go through so much data protection stuff, you start losing the will to live when you're doing that, and you have to be really quick with downloading the audio for it as well. So the audio is provided to you in a link, either by text message or email, in the case of Capita, for example, and then you have to log in and download that within 24 hours of the point that you requested it at the start of your assessment on the phone. Okay, it's better if you requested it in advance, but that will, so if your appointment for your assessment starts at 9 a.m, then you need to have downloaded it by 9 a.m. the next day. Otherwise, you can't easily get to it without putting in a request to that organisation, and it's a bit of a faff. But as always, get professional support with these things. That makes it a lot easier. What's your take on people getting a letter saying their PIP is extended? Yeah, just post the name ADMK2 on Google, says Edward. Yep, definitely. That's a good way of getting it. But like I say, if you, for some reason, you've got an issue with using Google or using the phrase ADMK2, maybe you're dyslexic, anything like that, just pop us an email or something, and I will forward it through to you. It's a bit wordy, to be fair, but yeah, just let us know. Hi Stu, what is your take on people getting a letter saying their PIP is extended for another year, but they still may need a review? Thank you, Angela. It's not a bad thing to have it extended in some respects. If you're happy and your circumstances haven't changed, if you're happy with the amount that you're receiving, that's okay. I think people generally prefer to not have to go through the reviews too often, so that's good. However, if your circumstances have changed or your condition has got worse, then that can be, and you might have been looking forward to that, but not looking forward, but wanting to do that, but you can still request a review at any time. So if you want to bring that review forward, you can do so. Just bear in mind your award may go up, may go down, or it may stay the same. But if you're happy, then yeah, let that just carry on for the time being. Tommy Tinkler, can I migrate on the very last day of notice and get the 1 year's protection, or does it need to be the day before? This goes back to that good reason thing. You can do it on the very last day, that's fine in terms of the legal side of it. They're going to say, well, it was cutting it a bit fine, but yeah, that will go through and it will be processed. A day before would be good, a week before would be better. As soon as you get the letter and comply with what it says in that letter is my advice. So if it says you need to do this as soon as possible, then do it as soon as possible. It's entirely up to you, but as I always say, get support with it if you're unsure. Peter Fensom, I still find it puzzling. I get LWCRA on Universal Credit, and I also get ESA, and in the support group for this, the ESA is deducted on Universal Credit every month. I got £2,000 back pay on ESA, and UC say I owe them £2,000. I'm wondering if you're on ESA contributions, Peter. Yeah, that would make sense as to why you're in both. So yeah, generally you can't have more than a ceiling amount. So if you're getting it through one source, then you won't get it through the other source, sort of thing. So then if you suddenly get it through that source, then that other source will have to be reduced to match. So you get a ceiling level amount that applies across there. So it is a bit confusing, and it's unnecessarily confusing, I have to say. But yeah, it's a lot. If it balances, then that's fine. I would always say, if you get an unusual payment for the DWP and you can avoid touching it until you know why you've got that payment and whether it's related to anything else, don't touch it, because you may well have to pay it back. Quite often people can go, oh, I've just got an extra 500 quid from the DWP for something, I don't know what, and then 3 weeks later, oh, you owe us 500 quid. That can be very stressful. So always look at any unexpected payments with extreme prejudice, I say. Not a question per se, I just thought you'd like to make a point on that. Okay, thank you, Peter. Any information on disregard of savings if I intend to buy a bigger house with them? I need to know more on that before I can say that, but there are specific guidelines on what savings can be disregarded. However, also there is a thing called deprivation of assets. So if you go depriving yourself of assets when there's no need to, so you'd have to demonstrate a need if you're buying a bigger house, and you're just why are you doing that? If you're already in a property that you own and that's suitable for you, why are you doing that? Is it just because you want to, or is it because you have a disability need, something like that? If you have got a disability need, then you'll need to get that evidence from an occupational therapist who said yes, he needs to move into a bigger house so that he can get his wheelchair around the place, something like that. So you have to have a need to spend your savings in a way that would be sensible and okay. We've gone over the 8 o'clock mark, so I'm going to wrap this up very soon because my brain is starting to go. But there's more information about that online. If I've not received my letter for migration by end of December, will it be in the new year? Yeah, so December 2025 for universal credit. So in a previous video, if you saw that and that's where you picked up this mistake, I said December 2024, and somebody corrected me, it was December 2025, and I thought, did I read that wrong? And yes, I did. So it's December 2025. So could happen any time between now and December 2025. Can you send ESA copies of letters the same as you would PIP, or is this a waste of time? If it's during the work capability assessment, then if those letters are evidence, then yes, do send it through. Does anyone know what PIP's definition of walking is? It's not really about walking exactly, it's about how you walk, and the key phrase is safely, consistently and reliably. Okay, so when you're looking at those distances, 20 to 50 meters, Edward posted a great little quiz in he puts these little polls in to see what people understand, but also kind of tells you the answer at the same time, so they're quite cool in that way. How long is 200 meters? And that's about 2 football pitches. So can you walk 200 meters safely, consistently and reliably, or would you need to stop? Can you walk 20 meters safely, consistently and reliably? Would you need to stop? You need to stop within or at 20 meters, that's one thing, but also, is there a likelihood that you would fall over? Would you trip? Would you stumble? Do you pick your feet up? All those things. Do you shuffle? All of that sort of stuff. So there's no real definition of walking as such. I mean, there are defining points that they look for when somebody's talking about their ability to walk. So yes, can you call ESA before you receive the letter to state your conditions? See, my brain shut down now. That question is just not going in. There's I don't know, it's like I've hit a wall. Can you call ESA before you receive the letter to state your conditions? Yes, you can, I think. Yeah, my brain shut down. I'm not quite sure what you mean, Michelle. I'll be honest. So maybe you can explain that in more detail to me over email. Why is the Gov targeting disabled people to get them back into work? If they need a pool of workers to draw from, surely they should be looking at UC claimants deeper. No. That's a bit of a political question there, Carl. And yeah, the other question about Charlie Anderson's, I'm not going to comment on what other YouTubers do on or talk about on their channels. That's not really up to me. I respect Charlie and what she's doing and the work that she does, so yeah, I'm not going to comment on that. She's out there, she's trying to help people, and she's supported a lot of people in really positive ways. So it's not for me to comment, certainly publicly, in any way, positively or negatively, on what any other YouTuber does, because people might be doing that about me, and that's up to them if they are, but it's not up to me. We're all good people just trying to help, and sometimes we make mistakes. I said earlier I got the date wrong, so it might be that it's weird. It might be that she's made a mistake on something, or it might be that she's bang on the money. Often I tend to find that people might misunderstand things as well, but I get things wrong all the time, and I also get stuff right quite a lot of the time, and I'm sure the same is true of Charlie and other YouTubers who are working to try and help us. Certainly a lot more than most of the people that are actually paid to help us, like the DWP are supposed to be helping us. So yeah, I'm not going to comment on that either way. Right, that's me done. So thank you to everybody on for joining us this evening and supporting each other in the chat, and big thanks to Duke of Nuke for doing the moderating and banging those questions in. That was really good, so thank you for that. Edward as well, and Sarah, you both amazing. Thank you so much for your support this evening. Yes, if I'm going to pop it in the chat now, if you do have any further questions that I haven't quite answered, or I've said to you provide me with a bit more detail for me to answer it properly, then please do pop something to my email address, which is just floating up there now, and of course as well, let's see if I can jump back to Edward's link for his group. That is, I'm going to pop that in the chat as well. So that's Benefits Support UK. So this is the link to Edward's group. And yes, so I'm going to go off and look after the people I love, which is Becky and Odin, because they are also amazing, and the cats as well, for fans of Pog and Bon, who are also amazing. So if you have pets tonight, like I say, give them a cuddle, look after them with the fireworks and whatnot, and whatever you do, stay safe, look after yourselves, be kind to yourselves. It can feel like the world's against you all the time, absolutely can, but I promise, nothing is permanent, things do change, and life changes. So yeah, just keep riding it out. If you're going through hell, just keep going. Okay. So yeah, and we'll be back. I'll have some more videos out in the next month or so. I've had some really great suggestions for things, and obviously if the government do anything stupid in the meantime, I'll report on that. Not that all governments are stupid or all their decisions are stupid, but if anything comes out that may or may not be stupid, then I will all let you know. And yeah, thank you all again. So take care, and see you again soon. Bye.